Thank you for coming. My name is Taka Ino. I'm from Hawaii, and I'm going to be talking about signals from nature in tea farming, what I learned in natural farming. So let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Taka Ino. I'm originally from Japan, also a tea maker at Mauna Kea Tea, and also studied the Japanese tea. So that's where I learned most of the tea making. And I want to give you a little story about matcha first. Because traditional matcha making, they follow the natural rhythm. And that's where I learned the tea making first. So matcha, it's traditional tea ceremony tea. And used in a tea ceremony. And nowadays, a lot of different cooking, baking, matcha cookies, things like that. Tea making usually start before it's ready for harvest. For matcha making, usually start with the seasonal cycles, and plum blossoms come first. So about end of February, beginning of Lunar New Year, plum blossoms flower. So that indicates the beginning of the tea season. From then on, 88 days is the tea picking time. And then followed by cherry blossoms. So these are the cultural traditions. And farmers there, they have these trees planted around tea field. So it indicates when they're working, they know. And also persimmon tree, they give a little signal. They grow about a week before tea start growing. So farmers follow persimmon trees for their harvest and work schedule. And sparrows are always there. They grow, they almost live with the environment. And when the sparrows become invisible in the persimmon tree, they start putting the shade over and use a reed down here. Oh. And after that, the persimmon keep growing and the crows in the tree become invisible. That's when they start putting the straw over to give more shade. And if you leave the shading too long, the tea start to get the stress. You can see all the curled leaves over here. So they gotta watch carefully. And when it's time for harvest, how do you know when it's time? Well, I would say it's like picking a ripe fruit off the tree. When it's ripe, you pick. If it's too late, then it goes bad. And also at the same time, birds, insects, they're watching for that too. And the finished tea usually have a dark green color and it has a shade-grown scent. And once the harvest is done, all the reed mat, straw, goes down on the ground and cover the ground as a mulch. So the seasonal cycle continues. So this is a traditional tea farming. Nowadays, only few farmers I know, they use this method. And even harvesting a reed, it's a lot of work. So nowadays you can actually buy reed from China, it's cheaper. So not many people actually do this anymore. And it takes a lot of work, so they don't recycle. They just put it back in the shed, use it next year. So this is not commonly practiced anymore. It's a very traditional, but not anymore. But at the same time, farmers, when they were small scale, they had other plants to tend to, like persimmon tree, citrus, shiitake mushrooms. So they are not just doing tea, but they are doing all these other things, which they had to work with a natural cycle. So by following these signs, they could complete each task at the seasonal right time. So this is one picture from a region of the tea growing region. It's a small scale farm. and usually surrounded by the forest. And in the forest, you see these mushrooms, shiitake mushroom growing. And you see a lot of shiitake growers. They also, after 5 years or so, they discard these logs, and some tea farmers use that into the tea field to enrich the soil. And here are some tea farmers. They start planting peas and onions and shiso. So it's part of their lifestyle. It's not just growing tea for money. And there are not so many farmers doing small scale anymore because it's not commercially viable. So this system is called Satoyama in Japan. It's a very traditional system. The small community of villagers, they grew with this system. So the agriculture and the humans work together, live in harmony. So things like harvesting rice straw, reed for the shade, and eventually putting it back to the soil. This was part of this whole cycle. And you can see the shade. Now this farmer, he's one of the rare farmers, he still stick to this method, but he puts it away for the next season so they don't have to harvest it again. And then also using the tea field. But this rice straw method is still used. So there are some farmers still using the rice straw because they are abundant. So here's another example of the small-scale tea garden and some persimmon trees. And there's some other fruit trees surrounded by the forest. They still exist. But a lot of farmers do a small scale, mostly for their own sake and their friends and families. So they don't usually come around in a commercial scene anymore. And there are some, this is a Gyokuro farmer, and he had some persimmon trees, flowers, and vegetables. And when they harvest the persimmons, usually these are bitter persimmons. You have to hang it, and once they dry, they get sweet. And there are sweet persimmon. Crows also come around and eat. So you don't get everything. But this is actually part of the symbiotic relationship. They keep the cycle together. So I don't know if you consider crow eating persimmons symbiotic relationship. Here's tea growing at Mauna Kea Tea. So this is what I started implementing, learning these natural cycles, and we started using these. At least I thought I was using, so we'll see. So in Hawaii, we have a lot of tropical fruits and flowers. And this is a native Hawaiian trees called ohia, and they blossom in wintertime. Well, winter here is different from winter in Hawaii. We have a summer and non-summer. And this is actually colder than our winter, so you might not consider it as a winter. But we get a lot of flowers, so I thought, oh, this is perfect. We're going to use that as an indicator for our tea harvest timing. And they usually come around April. So it's a little bit late. But over time, I'm finding out they don't blossom at the same time. So they don't blossom every year. It's different. And this is a turmeric flower, some naturalized gladiolus. And the citrus, plum blossoms, and cherry blossoms. These ones follow much better with the timing. So we started using plum and the cherry blossoms as an indicator. Some years they blossom early, so they indicate, oh, it's flush is gonna come early. Some years it's a little later. So what does it mean to be in harmony with nature? We think natural, we hear natural all over. So it seems pretty easy, you use something natural, it's not natural. Oh, there's a lot of gray area too. So to be able to answer the question, first, why natural tea? And I was looking around, seeing all these natural tea that claim to be natural. Are they really natural? And I couldn't find anything that I was happy with. So I started growing tea. And tea is becoming more and more commercialized to the point that all these efficiency, rich flavor, trying to get that impression, is taking over more than the natural aspect. And also farmers are becoming more specialized, more tea farmers dedicated for the tea, not the whole agricultural system of a different diverse crop. So we started our tea farming following the natural cycle. So by growing diverse crops, then we can enjoy different tasks. I don't know if I enjoy reading so much, but there are a lot of different tasks that's involved. And also allowing nature to take control. And also another thing we decided was not use pesticide. Because tea is one of the most polluted. You probably never hear this, but tea uses a lot of pesticides, and they never wash. When you harvest tea, the first thing is do not wash tea. You don't want the leaf to get wet, so when you process it, it cooks right. So a lot of tea is not washed. So we decided, okay, we're not going to use pesticide. And by doing that, it changed the way we think about tea making, or even just in general, how we see. Basically, when we use a pesticide, we eliminate, trying to get rid of it. When the pest comes, then we can eliminate. But if we start with the no pesticide, we have to think about prevention, because once the pests get there, it's too late. And also, you saw with the birds, they can get the persimmons. We can share. I remember one farmer from Israel telling me, they plant, the bean farmer, they plant 3 beans in each hole. One for bird, one for bugs, and one for person. So that's the way of thinking in the natural way. We have to share, so we don't have to take it all. And also my health, I was becoming more sensitive. So sometimes I couldn't even drink tea because I was getting very sick from drinking tea and getting heartburns. So I was really starting to look into what's making me that condition. So here's one book that really influenced me. It's called The One Straw Revolution by Masanobu Fukuoka. And you had read that before. And it's called The Natural Farming. He calls it natural farming. Natural farming is so generic to the point that it doesn't feel anything special. But basically what he does is don't use pesticide, don't use fertilizer or compost, no tilling, no weeding, no pruning. Basically you don't do anything. And when you don't do anything, nature takes over. And that's the idea. So this is one of the tea garden I found in China. Actually, this is an abandoned tea garden. So you don't even see any tea. Is this natural farming? Abandoning, not doing anything. Well, it's kind of difficult to say, oh, it is natural, but is it farming? So if we live in harmony with nature, I would expect they'll provide us in abundance. It's farming after all. You have to live, you have to eat. And I would expect more something like this. This is actually my boy, he harvests the sweet potato from a tea field. It started to grow wild into the tea field, and then he pulled it out. And then that's his trophy. And then these mulberries planted right next to the tea field, and they fruit certain time of the year, and they just go out and harvest. And this is what I expect nature will provide us in the natural farming way. And also avocados, we don't take care, but they provide. We plant it, and after I think 8 years or so, we have so many avocados. I think last year we got 300 avocados from one tree. And also some wild turkey just walking around, and he's harvesting soybeans, edamame. And there are a lot of wild, these are, actually we didn't plant, these grow wild. It's type of guava, pineapples, citrus, basically carefree. We don't have to do anything. So, pests and disease, they also happen too. No pesticides. We can't just treat the symptoms. So what do? Imagine if you get sick and you can't just take medication, you have to find the cause. What's causing it? Same thing in the farming. If we don't use a pesticide, we see the symptoms and we can't treat it. Then we have to look deeper. And we don't do this very much, but sometimes we dig down, find what's causing it. Usually it's underground. And this one you can see the root here. This is a tea root, a healthy tea root. There's nothing under here. So something's wrong in the ground. And here's another example. Down here, you see a lot of brown leaves. This is basically a dying plant. And sometimes it's too late by the time you see the plant dying, but you see the indication first. And at that time, you should be able to say, something's wrong. So when I dig down, there's a really bad drainage. So this was actually a root rot. So when the root rot, plant can't breathe because that's where they absorb the nutrients and basically breathe. So the way I approach this is, okay, if you don't do tilling, what do? How do you put air into the soil in a natural way? Here, a bunch of weeds growing. And this is a row of tea. So this is a fresh planting of tea. And we plant a thing called the cover crop. Basically what they do is, they're the dedicated weed that help us. So these ones, actually I planted, these weeds I planted. We don't harvest and eat anything, but they actually help the soil make better. So there's clovers, and this grass is called the Sudan grass. The root goes down 3 feet deep, loosen up the soil, gives the air and drainage to the soil. So by doing it this way, it provides the necessary soil condition that we need. And also we get bugs too. This is Chinese rose beetle. We get a lot of them to the young plant because they're stressed. When the tea plants are stressed at the younger age, they love it. They come and they eat all the leaves. Some places, basically we don't see any leaves anymore. They eat the whole thing up. And at the time when we plant the tea, we plant soybeans. And actually rose beetles like soybeans better than tea. So we call it trap crop. So we use that, and you can see little holes, and they go to the soybeans and they eat them. And tea is actually stressed, but they're not affected so much. And do you remember, we don't have to take all. So we can give some. If we can give some, they don't bother. And also we get the harvest too. Now he's happy because he got his soybeans, and we got the finished soybeans, so we can keep the cycle going. So remember, natural farming, we use no pesticide, no fertilizer, no tillage, no weeding, no pruning. But saying no to all these things, sometimes we need some of the things. I mean, when the soil is really poor, what do? Sometimes you start with the tillage, a little bit of tillage to improve the soil texture so you can actually get this cover crop in the ground. So I would say when the environment is right, they become unnecessary. So do you remember seeing that picture of the abandoned tea garden that can't sustain the growth of tea or other crops? If the environment is right, then it's so much easier to work with. Then we can get this to happen. Actually, Mr. Fukuoka, he said no pruning, but he prunes the citrus tree. And he said there's a certain way of pruning to make it more natural. Here's another example. Tea flowers. A lot of tea farmers, when they see tea flowers, they freak out because it's an indication of the unhealthy plant. So when they come to my farm, they really freak out because they see a lot of this. So conventional method is to give more fertilizer. So giving more fertilizer, basically there's more nutrient in the ground, more nitrogen in the ground especially. And tea plant can keep growing more leaves, and basically they don't have to reproduce anymore because they keep growing. When they can't grow, they go into reproduction. That's a basic idea. So what does this really mean? So in the natural farming, flower is a seasonal process. So in the natural setting, you go to the wild, you see all the tea flowers, and you see all the tea plants. This is natural, it happens. And in the mountains, tea plants don't really grow so much. They don't have so much nitrogen. So why are we creating so much artificial environment where we need so much nitrogen? So this is where I came to. Because more is better. So if you give more nitrogen, you get more harvest, and you get more tea. And if you're a farmer, you get more tea, you get more money, more cycle of more it produces, and it's better. And the flavor too. You give more, you get more flavor. And some say actually you get more antioxidant from the nitrogen you give. Does more stuff make us happier? So more is not better in the natural farming. So excessive nitrogen fertilizer use, this started happening in Japan about 1950. They gave fertilizer and they produced more. The flavor got better. So they start giving more and more and more. And there's a competition in tea. They start, the farmers who use more nitrogen fertilizer ranked higher. So there's a more tendency to give more fertilizer. And they got just higher and then escalated to the point that it got 10 times as much, and that still continues. So that creates an unnatural taste. And also, that creates pollution underground. It goes into groundwater. So when they test the groundwater, a lot of times they test the nitrate, which is carcinogenic. So have you ever heard the nitrate used in curing meat? Yeah, nowadays it's banned because it's carcinogenic. How about nitrate in water? EPA tests all the time. How about nitrate in tea? Have you considered that? So when you drink, is there nitrate in tea? Because they're taking up so much nitrate from the fertilizer. So umami, I don't know if you're out there drinking tea and then they tell you, oh, more umami, it's better quality. So we're told to believe that umami is better, more fertilizer create a better taste. And this is actually, theanine is a chemical that they say gives umami. And this is found after they start giving more fertilizer. So what does that mean? Are they using it to market more? Or are they really telling the truth? So when you talk to the old-time tea farmers, they complain. They say, this doesn't taste like tea. This is not tea. It tastes like vegetable. It tastes like when you cook a vegetable and then that's you just drinking the wash water. So a lot of old-time tea farmers, they say, there's no more aroma in tea. Usually there's a residual aroma in tea that you taste, and it stays there, lingering in the back of the throat. There's no more of that. It's all up front, flat, and then hits really strong, but then gone. So using less fertilizer, you actually get more lasting aroma. More fertilizer, it kills it. And I don't want to say there are a lot of the matcha growers or growers use so much fertilizer and then impress you with the umami. It is impressive. I like that too, because it's one of the sensation you, as a child, you learn to like. That's why the breast milk has a lot of umami. But how much is too much? Little bit of sugar you enjoy, too much sugar, what happened? So here's one example. This is the abandoned tea garden. Basically, there's no excess nitrogen in the ground. And the growth is really minimal. And this is my friend's tea garden in Kyoto. He gave a lot of chemical fertilizer to make it grow. So the frame of the plant is really small, but the top is heavy. So top of the plant start falling off. They're falling down. So what's natural teas? What is it like? Basically, over time, what I found out was that natural tea usually have smaller leaves, smaller growth, very symmetrical. They try to maximize, make it more efficient, and also lighter leaf color, lighter flavor, and pure, clean taste. It feels like when you drink the tea, it goes penetrate into your body. And this one I'm still testing, but it preserves better over time. It stays fresh longer somehow. And here's another picture of it's very small growth, light leaves, very symmetrical. They try to maximize, make it more efficient, the growth. Otherwise, they're wasting energy. They don't have so much energy to waste. So in natural tea, basically, tea itself is very unimpressive. So when you drink tea, it's nothing unusual about this. It's very usual. So how can you appreciate this? When you sip it, there's no umami, there's no sweetness, basically it's boring. And basically you need to learn to appreciate the tea that's boring or usual. It's very difficult because we are overwhelmed with so much going on, and then I don't know how else to say.
You just need to recalibrate your taste buds.
Sorry.
Maybe your taste buds are too used to really strong things, so you need to give them a break.
Right, so she just said our taste bud guys so used to the strong sensation of flavors. And then we look at the other food culture too. There's also the food that so strong with the flavors. It's old way of eating it just doesn't go with this anymore. So we got away from the natural food culture, natural cycle to the point that we can't appreciate anymore. Well, some of us can. Some of us learn to appreciate. So we need to go back to learning what natural tea is like. So here, pause and appreciate small, plain, and unimpressive, ordinary things in life. I would say that's the first step. And that actually helps us be happier too. And also I believe natural tea is healthier for our well-being and for our health because it's not loaded with so much chemicals or pesticides, or because it doesn't require. Do you remember? If the condition is right, it doesn't need. So if you're looking at those small growth, bugs are not interested because there's no so much nitrogen, which gives soft texture and also I believe living in harmony with nature will bring happiness to our life. So natural tea is a lifestyle choice. Basically, we have to choose to live this way, almost like a monk in a temple. And actually, I have a friend from a temple. They really appreciate these talks. So do you remember I was saying about, okay, I couldn't find any tea that I was happy with. So it wasn't the tea itself, it was a lifestyle choice. So when I go back to it, it's not just the tea, it's all how we live. And also the way we farm, it really helps me live the way we envision. So here are some ways that you can choose a natural tea. Smaller leaves, lighter leaf color, more emphasis on aroma instead of a flavor. And also knowing your farmer, if they're really dedicated, they will really talk passionately about their tea. And also this thing called the Bancha. It's a Japanese way of saying it's not very impressive tea. And there are two types of Bancha. So when you're picking Bancha, you have to be really careful because one is an old leaf from a Sencha harvest, and it's probably one of the most polluted ones because Sencha, they've sprayed so much, and the bottom ones is what's left. It's the one that sustained the new growth. So they spray a lot more on those so that it can grow, it can sustain the new growth. But also another meaning in Bancha, it's a regional tea, that old time where farmers, they used to make and enjoy for themselves. So they kept it for themselves. And there are so many different regional teas. I think about 50 or more. Each region you go to, you find the different ones. But these ones don't make money, so people stop making. Nowadays, I think there are only 3 or 4 different Bancha left because they don't make that anymore. And it's cheaper to buy the Sencha or other teas that's sold commercially. So natural tea, it's basically embracing imperfection. Also, not being afraid of making mistakes, challenging difficult things. It's a lifestyle choice. And learning from those mistakes. And being humble to know when we made a mistake. And we gotta learn from it. We can't just keep telling people, I know tea, so this is how it works. A lot of people do that. And also being open to listening. And having a mindset of growth and being a learner. So ultimately, natural tea is about cultivation of a human being, becoming a better person. So this is what I go back to. What do we teach our kids? This one, if I try to say something, do I want to tell them this way? If they're not eating vegetables, what do you say? Eat the vegetables. Why? But a lot of times you're just trying to do your job. Get the plate clean so you can get your job done. Or you're thinking for their benefit. How can you make them better? You tell them to do your homework. Are you just trying to get them to do the homework so that they can go to school and then your job as a parent, you can do that successfully? Or you're thinking for their benefit? Because some of the homeworks, it's not even beneficial. So if it's not good for them, are we just doing our job, or are we doing something for them? So whenever I go back to this, it really gives me a right answer. And we don't tell, they learn from what they see. So do they look like they're growing up to be a natural farmer? So what can we do? So we need to understand natural way of living, natural way of farming. It might cost more because now the system is upside down. It's cheaper to produce in a commercial scale, and everything is structured that way. Also, knowing how to choose natural tea. Do you remember the leaves are smaller, lighter color? Some of these things. And demanding natural alternatives. Some of the people selling tea out there, you can also demand. You know, these are not natural. I want natural tea. And they actually go out to the farms. Why can't they just go out to the different farms that focus on the natural production? Or grow your own tea. I think this area is really good for growing tea. So if you have about 50 plants in your ground, it's not that much. You can grow your tea and harvest and learn how to make tea.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So if you're growing natural tea, say you have 50 plants, how much tea can you produce?
If you have 50 plants to make tea for yourself, how much can you make? 50 plants will give about 3 to 5 teapots each harvest. And if you harvest 4 times a year, what would that be? About 15, 20 teapots. It takes a lot.
So if you harvest once a year, can you harvest more, or is it just
So the
one time, not more overall?
if you want to harvest more, this is where things kind of go, you know, instead of quality, instead to go quantity. It's a difficult decision because if we do tea growing as a business, then you have to always watch the numbers. And then if you don't produce enough, if you don't make enough money, then it doesn't work as a business. But as a home grower, you have a little more flexibility. If you don't get enough tea, you can still buy tea. So at least you can start there, and then, well, you can make it bigger, or you can have a community of growers to grow together, and you can be the one that in charge, so you tell them what to do. But if you're interested, I'm willing to help, because I really like to see this happen more, instead of seeing all the teas that doesn't follow the natural cycle. And I'm also curious to know what it tastes like from here. So ultimate goal of farming is not so much of a farming, it's a crop, but the cultivation and perfection of a human being. And this is where I come to. And this is a quote by Masanobu Fukuoka from the Natural Farming. Well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes.
How much land does it take to grow 50 plants?
How much land? I would say each seed you see, that's one plant. So this will produce about how many plants? 100 plants?
What do you think about a plant in a pot on a deck?
You can grow tea plants also in the pot, but it will grow a little bit weaker. Yeah, but you might have more flexibility in the area. You get frost, or you get some environmental condition that's not quite right.
Growing tea.
Home growing of tea. There is a literature published by University of Hawaii. You can look up home scale growing tea, something like that, and it comes up of University of Hawaii. Anything else? Umami. So umami is a flavor that's almost like tastes like a seaweed. Thick, rich. Some people say it's salty. If you had the breast milk, you probably know what it tastes like. Less umami in the tea with the less fertilizer,
Alright.
nitrogen fertilizer. Thank you.